Welcome to the Legion Outriders podcast, your source for the latest Legion news, opinion, and analysis. And now, the Outriders.
Hello, Outriders! Welcome to episode 128, a very special episode, but right now it's me, Dan, and John here with you in the studio. How's it going, fellas?
I think my LVO hangover finally wore off.
Finally wore off?
Finally.
Oh, man.
With the copious amounts of painkillers, yes.
How can you afford to get that wasted at LVO?
I don't know. Due to the largesse of my my savings, I spent it all on buckets of beer.
That's nice. But welcome aboard, everybody. We've got a special interview today. We're going to be talking with Will Shick and Will Pagani in the second section today. Today, we're just going to be doing a quick look over of our experiences at the Las Vegas Open, which happened last weekend. And but the next episode, we're going to be going a little bit deeper dive. John and Dan, I'm sure, will be talking about their lists and how it went and the games they played and all that kind of good stuff. But before we get to any of all that other stuff, Dan, how's it looking in the news, bud?
The Star Wars news. So we got some gaming announcements. EA, yes, they are still making Star Wars games.
I suppose they might as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're not the only ones, thank God, but they are. But they made an announcement that they're one of their studios they, of course, have acquired and added to their pile of studios. Respawn announced that they have 3 new games in development. So I guess they're just trying to build up some hype. I mean, yeah, no actual information, no titles, no screenshots, no nothing. But they did say that the next game in the Star Wars Jedi series, which is the Fallen Order, they didn't specifically say Fallen Order 2, though. So I'm curious if they could just use the super title. They already
said that they're doing a Fallen Order 2, but anyways, maybe not.
Maybe they'll use that game title to branch out into other series. But no, we definitely want to see a Fallen Order 2 because Fallen Order 1 was amazing.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. But they also said that they're working on a, quote, all-new Star Wars first-person shooter game. So they didn't drop the Battlefront title at all, but they said they're working on a new first-person shooter. And
is that a first-person shooter? See, that's not what I think of. I think of something like Jedi Knight or something like that. I think third-person shooter is better for the Battlefront.
It's funny because Jedi Knight dropped in a third person most of the time because you were using a lightsaber 90%
that's a good
of the time
point too. So Jedi Academy.
Oh man,
to confirm.
You're taking me back, man.
Yeah.
And finally, they also announced that a Star Wars strategy game. Ooh, this one tickles my fancy right here. Remember Force Commander?
No, not that.
Galactic Battlegrounds.
I remember that one.
That was good.
That was a good one.
Yeah,
that was okay.
Yeah, but anyway, Star Wars strategy game being developed through a collaboration with a newly formed studio called Bit Reactor,
which is apparently some guys that did the XCOM series.
Yeah,
so that style of strategy is what I'm expecting, not like a RTS.
Something a little more tactical than an RTS.
Yeah, I think that would be.
I'm here for a turn-based strategy game.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool, and definitely you got a panoply of characters and classes to pick from.
We've already got a turn-based strategy game with Legion. It's Legion, turn-based.
Yeah, but it hasn't been published by
tactical.
EA.
True.
So.
Well, I mean, that's a good thing. But yeah, that's about it. Other than, of course, the amazing last episodes of Book of Boba Fett. No spoilers, but
oh goodness, yeah. I got my Black Series Boba helmet.
Oh yeah,
down by your elbow
posted,
there.
Posted up in the Discord.
Yes, I did. I'll be wearing that for at least a few minutes during the finale.
Until I'm sure you can barely see out of that thing.
It's horrendous.
But a little bit of LVO news.
What?
357 days to LVO.
Oh, you're not going to do that this entire year, are you?
I did it the whole last year.
Did you?
Yeah, all the way up until 2021 got canceled.
Hey, John, do we need to have an intervention?
I'm guessing the wall next to his bed is just like little hash marks.
It's just a prisoner.
Like he's in prison.
Yeah.
Just like with a fork turned into a chisel, just like carving out.
Faint harmonica music echoing from the cells next door.
Yeah, and you didn't go with the Force Awakens where Rey was scratching the numbers on the inside of the AT-AT? No? Okay. No one remembers that movie.
No.
But anyway.
No.
I was going like Shawshank Redemption, like you had a poster of Bikini Leia on your wall where behind it you had scratched off all the dates.
But yes, we did have the Las Vegas Open this last weekend. Just about 6 days ago. Dan and I got down there on Thursday and helped schlepping all the tables down that were being provided by the local area. So Dan, I got to say thank you. I got tapped to be actually on the staff, but you got kind of drafted in there, so I appreciate you.
No, it was a pleasure, and it got me to get in and at least find where the hall is early.
Well, you did that because you spent a lot of time there. John also donated a table, but not his time, so we shame you. Shame.
I'll accept that.
No, it was a beautiful table. Honestly, the tables continue to be amazing down there, and it was a real joy to actually be part of the staff, seeing what goes into a little bit of the production. Like, I've run events for part of the game store thing, but nothing on that scale, and it definitely gave me an appreciation for the kind of job that LJ and all the judges and all the other staff that were roped in there. Met some awesome people.
That's talking with the other members of the community, the other podcasts.
Yeah,
it was great meeting everyone in person.
I got to say, it felt a little bit different with the dynamic being actually like, okay, I'm at the desk, I'm helping out here, versus out at the tables with you guys rolling dice and all that. There's a slight separation in the camaraderie I felt, but that's fine. I don't know, maybe that's just me. It was like I was in like operations mode.
Well, I think I spent about as much time coming over to the table and hanging out with you guys
that's
as I
true.
did playing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
No, but without getting into like talking about how the actual event went, I mean, major thank you to LJ, to Emily, to Nima, to you, to Brendan, to all the people who made that happen, because it was no small feat what they accomplished, and I think I speak for everyone who was there. It was great time.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm hoping to, of course, be able to do that again. Any issues this time around?
Jeff's table, but
yeah.
No, we've talked about that. No, I mean, there really were no issues. Like, there was a great diversity of table setup. I think the list that we saw there, the top 6 don't belie what the rest of the field looked like, because it was a really good smorgasbord of different lists of factions, and we'll touch more on that once we get kind of a deep dive into what we saw there.
What do you guys think of the Rio as the new venue and home?
It needs water.
It does, yeah. So there was some operational things going on there. It was kind of interesting, and I know that Reese and the FLG guys were really... they were doing their best to circumvent some of the obvious shortcomings there, and hats off to them for that, and hopefully they'll get that resolved for next year. But yeah, not having the water fountains around was kind of a pain. Plus, the hall we were in, it was a little dim.
Yeah.
Did you guys notice that?
Made a little fun with the streaming setup. We were. I was helping source cabling and whatnot for that, because we had to get some extra lights set up for that, so the stream was visible.
Well, and in addition to that, I think they were having some major issues with the connectivity, right? At least the first day.
Were they?
Oh, really?
I hadn't heard about that.
My first, I was, spoiler alert, I played on stream the first day.
Yeah,
the first game.
you were quote unquote randomly selected, and it seems like every event you go to, you're randomly selected to be on the stream.
Well, it used to be an anomaly because I was the only guy running a bunch of Wookiees, and now it's like, well, everyone's got Wookiees.
Right.
But
trendsetter.
Yeah,
it's because he's very photogenic from the navel down. So.
Exactly. Yeah, it's these long gams. No, the guy who was streaming, I can't remember his name, but they were saying that they were the first game.
David,
yeah.
No, it wasn't David. His tech guy who was helping him.
Yeah.
He was saying that they were having some connectivity issues with that first game. So I don't know if it continued throughout the weekend.
No, I rewatched the streams after the fact, and they seem pretty solid.
I think they're getting uploaded right now to the Yavin Base YouTube.
Yeah.
So
you
can go watch your game again.
I can go watch myself.
Yes.
I actually did well in that game, so maybe I will.
Okay, yeah. Only playing the hits. Dan, how was your experience?
Oh, it was great. Like I said, a lot of networking, a lot of chit chatting and meeting everybody, and a lot of these people for the first time in person.
Yeah.
It was great to meet everyone. Again, we're not going to talk games, so I'm not going to talk about what my record was.
Let's talk about the number of players that we had, both in the main and the side event. In 92, I believe, for the first heat.
Yep. Yeah, which is incredible based on the fact that we were, we're still in a pandemic, and there were people who had to cancel because of travel issues and stuff. So having 92 that's the biggest event we've seen so far, right?
Right. Yeah. That was a record setter, and I think we could have done better if for those other reasons that you mentioned. But talking briefly with Kicker, one of the FLG guys while we're out there, it sounds like the goal is we'll be kind of in the same room next year, but it'll just be Star Wars related things. We had I think some Lord of the Rings and Song of Ice and Fire that were in there as well as the Armada and X-Wing guys. So hopefully we'll continue to fill tables there.
But even the 40K room is normally just packed, and they saw a smaller percentage of people, because of the pandemic. So
sure.
We did pretty well.
No, I'm very happy with everything that happened there. But anyways, guys, we're just going to keep this part short. And like I said, we'll do a deep dive on the next episode. Otherwise, we're going to get ready for our interview. So we'll be back in just a moment. Hey guys, Matt here to tell you about our friends over at 6up Supply. If you're like me and don't have access to your own 3D printers, 6up Supply has you covered with a whole suite of printing services to bring those awesome files to life. The Outriders are proud to be partnered with 6up, and you could find special themed terrain, gear, and tokens with a big discount for Patreon members in the Outriders Central section of the website. And that's not all. You can also get terrain bases, game supplies, tools, LED kits, and more. Stuff is being added all the time. So stop by the number 6upsupply.com and use coupon code OUTRIDER to save 10% on your next order, and let them help you up your game.
You are receiving the Legion Outriders podcast. Ending the transmission now would be most unfortunate. And now, the Outriders.
Welcome back, Outriders. Matt, Dan, and John here, and we're joined by very special guests with us today. You've heard of the Guardians of the Wills, but we've actually got the Wills. So Will Pagani and Will Shick are joining us today on the show. How's it going, guys?
It's going super well. How are you all?
Oh, we're doing great. We're just excited to have you guys on today.
Well, we're excited to be here.
So for those that may not be familiar with the House of AMG, Atomic Mass Games that you guys are involved with, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do there?
I'm the development manager for Atomic Mass Games, which is a fancy way of saying that I kind of lead all of the game development that happens at Atomic Mass Games. And that's for all the games, which includes Legion, X-Wing, Armada, MCP. And that's what I do there.
And Mr.
That's all.
That's it, huh?
This is super informative. Just like, I'm the development manager. I manage development.
Just a few of the hottest properties in gaming out there right now.
And Mr. Shick, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Will Shick, commonly referred to by Shick because there are so many Wills in our lives that we just automatically go by last names. In fact, all the developers do. It's a weird sports ball thing that we do, which is funny. Everyone's last names. So I'm the director of product development. What that means is basically I am in charge of overseeing every aspect of the product development cycle. So I do all of the forward planning and of like what's going to come out, when it's going to come out. I do a lot of the work with our great licensors at LFL for all the Star Wars stuff, and talking with them and making sure that they're on board and getting feedback from them. I work very closely with our development manager, Will Pagani, and close with the game developers as well, to make sure that all of the game rules and the concepts and the designs come out true to the IP as much as possible and kind of fit the vision for the product. And I also work on the creative side, so work very closely with our creative director, our directors, and on the engineering and the sculpting side. So a lot of concepts, picking out like what looks of characters we're going to do so that they line up with the game rules and stuff. So it's kind of like being at the head of the overall structure to make sure that everything goes and everybody kind of knows what's going on. And if somebody has a question, they can typically come to me and I can usually answer it. And if I can't answer it, I can figure out the answer pretty well. So it's a fun time. It's juggling a lot. It's spinning a lot of plates, juggling a lot of hats. I don't know why I was going to say that, but it's Friday, so you can juggle hats. It'd be hard though.
Well, we really appreciate you guys joining us. I mean, all three of us have been here with Legion since the beginning of the game, but we also dabble a little bit of MCP, and we know you guys are the brain children behind that as well. So So with us having played Legion for so long, we've loved watching how it's developed. The FFG team did a great job of creating and growing what we think to be one of the best tabletop games out there. What are some of the things that you enjoy most about Star Wars Legion when you first took the game on, and what are some areas of improvement that you think you could make, that you'd like to make after your first couple playthroughs?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you're going to get similar answers from both Pagani and myself, but he started on the last one, so I'm going to start on this one. I think, yeah, I know. I think one of the really cool things that Legion does well and is very interesting is the command hand, and how that really influences the turn order and your tactics and how it interacts with the order stack, right? The command and control logistics of the game I think are really intriguing. And there's a lot of interesting meat as a developer or as a designer to kind of dig in and be like, how do you play with that system? How do you manipulate it? And what does that open up for players to make interesting choices and have agency in the way things go? And that was a really cool thing. I think from a less like Flash, but more of a just kind of ingenious concept. I think the way that movement works with the units for the most part is very, very cool and interesting, because of how it simplifies something that can be a big time drain. If you've played any other miniatures games that have units, each like member of the unit kind of moves, but you have to measure it out. And so there can be a precision thing and a time thing. I think the way in which Legion kind of simplified certain steps of a very traditional like miniatures game process was kind of genius, because it opens it up to people who have never been experienced with these games, because it makes it just so much quicker and intuitive. Place your unit leader and then just place the people around him, rather than having to worry about each individual trooper only moving their maximum move of like 6 inches or whatever. So I think there were a lot of like streamlining things that happen in kind of the core rules themselves and the mechanics that were also kind of ingenious from like a developer perspective, or was like, oh, that's really smart. This kind of solves problems that people don't recognize, I think, initially as problems, but you feel them even if you don't understand like what's going on. So those are kind of some of the big ones for me. Obviously, I love the Star Wars IP, and I really think that Legion does a great job of capturing the essence of what people want when they come to the game, and that is feeling like you're retelling this big story on the tabletop. Kind of retelling the big moments that we don't see a lot of in the films, but you do see quite a bit of in like the Clone Wars series and stuff, of armies kind of coming together and clashing, and things feel appropriate in the way in which they move and they kind of interact and stuff. I think there's very good storytelling elements to the game, which is important because it makes you feel like you're telling your own Star Wars, tales.
Yeah, the times that you can find just iconic moments like two lightsaber wielders just meeting up in the field in the middle, and it just feels so iconic for Star Wars. Yeah, chasing those moments is just a great part of the game.
Mr. Pagani, what was your first experience with getting into Legion, and where did you want to progress it from there?
Sure. Well, I actually played Legion a million years ago when it first came out as well. I was a local game store owner, so I played basically every game that came out at the time, just to know the product and that kind of thing. So one of the things that really stuck with me from when Legion originally launched, one was the command hand, as Shick stated, and he and I have talked about this a lot, so that's why he was like, we're going to say the same thing here. But the other thing that I really, really love and still do is the battle cards and stuff, and how that has developed as the game has gone on and created this really interesting system for how you build your scenario for every game. One of the things that I love in basically all games is scenario play. So I'm always interested in new and exciting ways to build scenarios inside of games. And I think Legion does a phenomenal job at that with that system.
So based on the background that you guys have working with multiple game systems, and then with the work you've done with AMG through Marvel Crisis Protocol initially, I think most of us in the Legion community, when we saw that Legion would be moving on to AMG, we knew it would be in good hands. But there's always some challenges that come with working on multiple games at the same time. How do you guys ensure that Legion, MCP, X-Wing, all these properties will kind of be getting equal treatment, and on the same token that the rule systems won't become too similar?
So I think I can talk about this one a little bit here, Shick.
Yeah, go for it.
So underneath me at AMG there are developers, right? These are people who write rules, they brainstorm, they do all these different things that it takes to create a game. And each game line has its own developer, and that developer sort of specializes in each individual game. But we also have a collaborative environment for how the developers work. So each of the developers is expected to also know the other games that we make, and then they can help each other from there. And of course, Shick and myself are familiar with all the different games that we make as well. So whereas I may not be the perfect shining example of everything that is Legion, I have enough of a grasp on Legion that I can play it and talk about it and help the developer along with their things. And then the other developers for the other games can do that as well for the Legion developer or the X-Wing developer or the MCP developer. So that gives us a really good sort of core, that there is one person who is like the hyper specialist in each game. And then you also have the people around you that can help you brainstorm and come up with ideas, because AMG is very collaboration focused. So Shick always likes to say whenever we hire someone that no person is an island. Nobody at AMG does anything alone. And to me, that system has worked exceptionally well for bringing ideas in. And if somebody has a problem, you go, oh, well, we solved that problem this way in X-Wing, or we solved it this way in Legion. You're like, oh, okay, cool. How can we adapt that into the system for this game? Because we do absolutely think about each system in each game as its own unique entity. And homogenization is not something that we are interested in. And each game brings its own strengths, and we want to keep those strengths.
I think like one of the biggest cores to the whole idea, right, is there are underlying philosophies and ways in which we do things, like any studio does it, right, that are just they're it's kind of like when you ask 3 different chefs to make the exact same meal, and you get the exact same meal, but each one tastes a little different, like one chef is really into spices, so like theirs has a bit of a kick. One chef is really into like making reductions and all of this, so like it has this flavor, right? At the end of the day, though, even though those kind of like tendencies and those underlying philosophies do influence the final product, especially when it comes to like how do you standardize rules, how do you write your rules language. We didn't answer half of your question at the front, which was like, what are some of the things that we kind of want to bring to Legion or to change, quote unquote, change in Legion? Like how do we want to advance the game forward? And I think some of the major things that we've talked about right away are just in terms of how the rules are written, in terms of how information is presented. Legion was a very it was an organic growth thing where the waves would come out and they would build on each wave. And it was kind of FFG had a very unique and different studio mindset in terms of how they built things, what they did. And that's very natural for studios to do. And I think our big thing is kind of like, okay, well, we see all this stuff and we can identify issues within kind of the organic, like building blocks thing, right? You run into standardization issues. It leads to more questions, or it can lead to issues down the road because not everything is streamlined and synergized together, right? Your language starts to get a little muddy because you're not looking at something like, from the miniatures game world that we've come from. Every game that we've ever worked on has this idea that it is an infinite game, right? It will never end. So when you approach games in that way, which is slightly different from the board and card game experience that FFG was born out of, they made amazing board and card games, and then they stepped into miniatures, and they, as you said, they made a fantastic miniatures game in Legion, and of course X-Wing and Armada, but they brought with them, like I mentioned before, right, their own kind of viewpoint, their own philosophies on how to do that stuff. And board and card games are kind of, they're built in kind of bubbles, right? Like you make a board game, you're like, okay, someday we might come back and make an expansion, but we can kind of release that and then we move on to other things. And so I think it's one of the philosophical differences in terms of how we approach stuff and the things that we want to do are, we're always looking at okay, if we write a rule now, it has to be the exact same thing and work 20 years in the future, no matter what we make, right? So we're always looking to how can we simplify, cut out, streamline every piece of language so that it's consistent throughout the entire time. And it just leads to a different kind of vernacular. So I think one of the big things for us with Legion is the opportunity to kind of go through and bring that cohesion, kind of like push everything together in a way that, for us, creates a rule set that we feel like will be the best it can be for the miniatures game experience and the kind of like consistent expansion and growth that we want to take going forward, right? In some ways, it's setting the stage for us to be able to do the things that we know how to do and the way in which we do things. Because I'm not trying to say like anything like our way is better than the other. It's just simply kind of a different viewpoint. It's a different way of achieving the same result. And that's been one of our big focuses as we've like looked at this stuff is, okay, well, how do we make this language kind of fit what we believe will make the best game going forward? And then also make sure that stuff works within the framework that is there. So that's kind of the point to that, which does somewhat lead into the next question, which again is like, so you have these underlying philosophies, and yet you want to avoid homogenization. And the way in which you do that, as Pagani kind of mentioned, is we do have lead developers that work specifically as specialists on one game line, but we also make sure that we establish like what is a game supposed to be, right? You have core pillars of every game. Legion is a mass combat like army experience. It has extreme command and control elements that drive it, and it's grounded in the Star Wars IP, and there's a couple other pillars that go with it. It's not, it doesn't fall under the same pillars or the core philosophies that drive Marvel Crisis Protocol. And that's a good thing because we don't want to make the same game 4 different ways. We want to make 4 different games that attract their own communities and stuff like that. So it's just always going back to that, like, are you making choices that are true to the core stated principles of the game? And, or are you not? And I think for the most part, because everybody is familiar with the games and we all play everything, it's very easy to keep those things in mind and to self-check when we start to stray a little bit off the path.
So one thing that you guys have talked about with, your live streams and on other podcasts was your dedication to some of the narrative elements of the game. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Despite what our tournament records might reflect, a lot of us do enjoy to play competitively as well. And
you do just fine.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people do really enjoy the competitive aspect, maintaining the game balance, things like that. How close do you guys pay attention to, competitive scene, tournament results, things like that, to drive, updates and things in order to maintain that game balance?
So we definitely do. Paying attention to what your community is doing, what the players are doing is really important for any game developer, right? And that goes for anyone making any kind of game. So knowing about what experiences people are having in events or tournaments or even local store events, right? Not even just the big national stuff or world stuff, is, I think, very, very important for any developer. So that's definitely something that we look at. But as you mentioned, the narrative stuff is also really important to us. My background is from competitive gaming. That is how I got into this industry. That's what I've kind of always done in gaming. And I love it, and I am here for it. But I also want to say that, like, competitive gaming is just one part of gaming, right? There's competitive gaming, there's narrative gaming, there's league gaming, there's casual game. Like, there's every different type of gaming that you want out there. So something that we always try to do with all of our games, and one of our goals here is to expand the options that players have to play games. So for Legion, we've already talked about like special scenarios that we have coming up here, and maybe Shick wants to talk a little bit more about those in a moment. But we're going to have organized play kits that go to stores that are for tournament support. We're going to have organized play kits that go to stores that are for narrative events, that are for league play, that are for all these different options that you have out there. And we're going to give you different and unique ways to experience Star Wars Legion in as many different ways as we can, because 1, we think it's pretty cool, and 2, hopefully people enjoy playing these things. And these things can range from anything in Star Wars, right? We've talked a little bit about the goal of having a sort of 1 versus many Darth Vader fighting against an entire Rebel army option. There's work on that. So we're still working on that. We've got other OP kits planned. Shick, I don't know, you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. Kind of to go back to the the original question just a little bit more about like watching. Pagani mentioned we watch a lot of different aspects um, for trends, for issues. And the big thing is because, and this is one of the really enjoyable things about working on games like these, is that because they have ideally infinite lifespans and they're constantly living and growing, they grow and change. Like it's a very organic environment, right? It's not controlled. When we do our testing and our development and everything, and we run the thing through as many games as we can internally and with our play testers, and we take all the feedback, we're giving over the best developed rules and product that we think we can make. But the second that it hits the wider world, evolution happens, right? And it can happen very quickly, or it can be a sleeper that happens 10 years later, and somebody unlocks, they have that big brain moment, and they unlock the thing that nobody has seen yet, and it dominates everything, right? And I think that's one of the really exciting things about it, and it's what makes it so important to watch. We talk a lot in our dev panels and other things about, we don't pretend to be perfect. In fact, I think that's like the biggest sin that you can commit when you are developing any game, but especially a living game, right? If you stand on the point that whatever I made was perfect and it can't be wrong, then you're going to run into problems because it's going to have to get tended to, right? Like you can't,
Sure.
I always go back to gardening. You can't plant a garden and then just leave it, because it doesn't stay the way you left it, right? It grows in different ways. So there's a constant amount of tending that has to be done to it. And a lot of that knowledge of like what needs to be trimmed, what needs to be weeded, what needs to be pruned comes from the amazing like amount of data you get from the community itself, right? Because we can play, even if we played 10,000 games in a cycle, which is well beyond what's truly reasonable for the most part, right? Like Pagani's like not even close, right? But even if we did, that's still just a tiny percentage of the amount of games that are played in the first 3 months worldwide, between the community, because the community is so robust. And and on top of that, like I said, you have those big brain moments. You have people who just analyze things differently. And so one of the big things you always try to do with playtesters and stuff is get a lot of different points of view. You never want to have like that echo chamber, because someone's going to think differently about something, and that's when you get into trouble. And it certainly has caught us in the past on different things that we've released. And that's why, you just always accept the fact that like you're going to do the best job you can, and then you're going to learn stuff along the way, and then you're going to apply those lessons in the future, and you're going to consistently get better, but you're always chasing perfection, right? You're never perfect. For some people, that's like soul crushing. For me, it's really exciting because I don't ever want to master something. I just want to consistently get better at it. That to me is exciting. And that's why I love hobby. And it's really why I love miniatures games.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing what we saw at LVO this weekend, I mean, the diversity of the list that we saw, I mean, it shows that, even though the narrative is amazing and it's the, the for fun games are great, seeing so much, there is no meta, really. I mean, there's so many things that people bring to the table and perform well with. Like you said, you give those people who have those big brain moments where, Bushfax, John Bushman, brings a list that most people probably wouldn't touch and makes top table with it. And you're not going to see that in a lot of other competitive tabletop games. That Legion is very unique, and that's part of the reason why I love the game. You addressed a lot of the stuff we wanted to ask about organized play, but you gave us a brief preview of what was to come as far as themed lists with your battle forces, and I know we're all very excited about that.
Very, very excited.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Well, we can talk a little bit more. I know you guys wanted to know a bit more about like our plans for organized play and stuff, and we touched on it. But I'm happy to go a little bit deeper if you'd like.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yes.
No, don't tell us more information.
Yes.
Hey, you never know. You might just be like, no, we got the answer we wanted. Move on.
No, absolutely. Tell us.
So
glean us with information.
So organized play, obviously we come from the miniatures game, industry. It's the only gaming industry job that I've had. I've been engaging with these games forever. Like Pagani mentioned, he got into the whole like industry through his world championship run that he had. He was like the New England Patriots. So he was a dynasty for a while. He showed up and it was just like, well, we know he's going to win. But so like organized play, it's so important to the community growth and how these games grow and spread, right? Having games played, having people get really engaged. Again, thinking about like the really cool thing about any miniatures game, but especially a game like Legion, is that you get to constantly improve your skills. You get to grow. And there are different ways to do that. You know, like competitive play is really important because it gives you a chance to kind of have those big brain moments, to find the combos, to hone your skills, and to overcome obstacles, right? A player that places dead last in a tournament can work on their list, can work on their play, can come back and see themselves climb through the ranks. Just like
There's hope for you, Matt.
I'm saying this is I need to be writing this down.
If you want to, I mean, it all comes down to like, what are your goals? You know, what is your hobby journey, right? We talk a lot about on the painting streams how the hobby journey for the painter is just get paint on the miniature to start. And then if you want to and you have fun with it, continue to like just do it over and over again and work on your skills, and you're going to see yourself progress, and then you can take that progression any way you want. For some players, you know, like the Paganis of the world, that progression, that drive looks like I want to be the very best. I want to win at a world's championship. For other players, it's just like, I just want to have a 50-50 win rate and play with things that I love and figure out how to make them work, right? That's more of like where I sit. I want to take a cool list, and then if I can win like half the time with it, but have a blast the other half the time, I don't really care. You know, I'm not interested in getting a gold medal. That's just, for me, that's a level that I don't want to go to. And I think that's you get a lot of player choices when it comes to that. But having an ecosystem where players can make those choices and grow in those different ways can be really important. And Legion is one of those games that, you know, it was very much built on, and the FFG team did a really great job of really building this robust competitive environment where you have regionals and you have worlds, and there's a track for you to become, you know, the next world champion. And we at Atomic Mass Games definitely want to maintain that. Now, COVID, of course, has messed with everything. And, you know, even before kind of the transition happened, everything was pretty messy and things were getting delayed or canceled, because the number one priority over anything is the safety and the health of the players in the community, right? No trophy is worth somebody getting sick. So, you know, we've tried to be really careful and cautious and do our due diligence to make sure that everybody stays safe and healthy and happy, and that we're doing right by the community. But someday, and hopefully very soon, the goal is to return back to having, you know, larger competitions, larger world types events where people can come and they can exercise that skill. And to kind of look at what that looks like going forward, one of the real big benefits of being part of the Asmodee family, which Atomic Mass Games is that Asmodee has so many resources and has a global reach. So there is a team at Asmodee that deals with now all of the major events that happen across the globe. So we work with them directly. We have a brand new person who's working for us. She came over from the Asmodee North America side, Courtney Downing. She's amazing. She used to work on all of the organized play kits as one of the producers. She'd do all the production and stuff for them. But she's taken over our organized play and events role. And so part of that job is that she works with the global Asmodee organized play groups to make sure that they have everything they need to be able to run these big events. And they have lots of plans on how to do these, and we're very excited to work with them on that. So those things will be returning, and it will be a very exciting time when that happens. On the flip side of that, as Pagani mentioned, right, one of the big things that organized play to us also means is it's a community builder. It's a way for players to come in and engage with their massive collections in ways that add extra value to things, right? Just because the base game is the most fun way to play for the vast majority of players doesn't mean that it's the only way to play, nor does it mean it should be the only way to play, right? How many of us have a unit that we just love but can't quite make work to the way we want because of the way the basic game is set up? Narrative, casual, like various formats of the game allow certain things to shine in ways that they can't normally. So a couple of the organized play kits that you're going to see coming up very soon. There's one that is a normal game of Legion. It has a very special scenario. You're fighting over objective points on the map, but in addition to fighting over the objective points, kind of like a normal game of Legion, there's a roaming Dianoga that runs around the table and, you know, causes havoc. It murders all the dudes like a Dianoga would.
Oh, hell yeah.
And the control of the Dianoga flips back and forth between different players depending on the scenario circumstances and stuff. So you've always got this chaotic X factor of like the Dianoga's messing with you, and you have to kind of plan around it, but you can never be completely sure. That kind of stuff, you know, the narrative of it, the kind of the zaniness of it can be really exciting. And that one's going to be coming out. And then the other one that I can kind of spoil or tease a little bit is a Legion skirmish one. It's a specialized scenario. If you think like it's basically the Alamo, so one side can take a lot of commanders and operatives, and then the defender, like they're the defenders, so they're trying to hold out until their shuttle shows up and they can get off the base, right? The alarm's been raised.
Oh, that's
and then
cool.
the other side is playing like the base defenders, and so it's just masses and masses of like troops pouring out over and over again, right? And so it's a bit of like it's a grinder. Can you survive long enough against the mass of troops to get off with your spoils?
I'm getting Battlefront Ewok Hunt vibes off of that.
Yeah, a little bit, right? So those are the kinds of things, like not only do they provide new and extra value for ways to play with your collection, but they also, you know, they attract a different person. Like I said, there are people out there who love competition. They want to challenge themselves. There are people out there who don't love the pressure of competition, right? You know, the folks who just want to play casually or are looking for kind of an escape, and they just want to have like a relaxed game, and win or lose, they're just kind of looking for a fun, weird experience. And having that breadth of options for people is really important, because even the most competitive player, I think, can't help but have fun playing the game in a new and fresh way that allows them to kind of just take that deep breath and be like, okay, now I'm ready to go back to it. And that's always been our philosophy of it's a balance. And the local store is such a great place to do that, because that's where your journey starts. And so giving people a lot of fun ways to engage with the game only makes them love it more. And then that leads you to the next steps of your journey.
And that's,
so there's my long-winded organized play.
No, I think that's where a lot of us exist throughout most of the year. You know, we have our month prepping for LVO for us in particular here in Vegas, but you know, through most of the year, we're looking for fun, new, innovative ways of playing Legion. So yeah, having those narrative scenarios coming up, I mean, both those scenarios sound awesome. I'm excited to play them.
I just wanted to mention that the statement you made earlier about finding that 50-50 win rate with a list that you're excited about. I just wanted to heart and thumbs up that one so hard, because that's it. That is my spiritual statement for how I like to play Legion.
Well, you got to get to 50-50 first, Matt.
No. I've got my journey. Okay, we were just talking about that.
Yeah, it's a journey. Jeez. You don't start there; you get there.
Oh God. So we're talking a little bit about the battle forces, and you mentioned battle forces on a stream a while back, and I think a lot of us have been just kind of champing at the bit for that one. What more can you tell us about the battle forces?
Well, battle forces are all designed around specific thematic moments inside of the Star Wars canon. So I know we've talked about things like Echo-based defenders, which are the rebels defending Echo base on Hoth, and then we also have Blizzard Force, which is the name of the attacking Imperial army that is now landed and is invading the evacuating rebel base. So that is two of them that are coming that we have talked about. And the idea behind these is not to sort of replace normal Legion or anything like that, but it is to give players another option that they can play with in normal Legion games. And that does include competitive play and all that kind of stuff. I know that I've seen that question floating around. Are these going to be legal for tournament play? Absolutely. And sort of going back to what Shick said earlier about finding new ways for units to exist in that space that maybe they were missing the mark before or something like that. These battle forces, in my eyes, can do that, right? So if you get a command card that is exceptionally good with X, Y, or Z unit that is unique to this battle force, I guess that might be a spoiler. I don't know if we've said that out loud. The battle forces come with unique command cards. At least these ones do.
And those will be eligible for competitive play as well, or for
Absolutely,
normal
yes.
play?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you play this battle force, you get access to additional command cards that you can only use in that battle force.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So these are not generic command cards that everybody can use. You have to play Echo Base Defenders to get these command cards. You have to play Blizzard Force to get those command cards, etc. And these command cards we can tailor to specific units that are allowed in these battle forces, because battle forces are restrictive. You can't play everything in Rebels in Hoth because they weren't there. Like, why would I almost said why would Tauntauns, but that's actually where they're from.
Definitely Tauntauns.
Bad example.
Tauntauns are
Bad example. But yeah, so like you only get the things that were on Hoth in the Hoth battle force, right? And that's not to say that like if it's not wearing the right hat, it doesn't get to go, but they're restrictive army building things that allow us to do sort of unique things, and we've messed with a lot of the different options in the game in these battle forces. Like they don't use the normal force organization charts or anything like that. So you're going to get new options. Maybe you get more commanders. Maybe you get less core requirements or something like that, right? So you can take these interesting different lists than what you could normally take. And the goal for these, of course, is to be balanced for competitive play. We want them to be in competitive play. We want to balance them for competitive play. But they give you options to use units that you may not be inclined to use in a full list where you can take anything you want.
Like to give a spoiler example of that, the 501st Battle Force is, as we were concepting that and what we wanted to represent with it is we really wanted to represent the 501st as kind of this elite force within the clone army. These are like Anakin's hand-picked team. They've been through a lot, so they boast a lot of elite level troopers. And one of the best examples of elite level troopers to us was the ARC troopers. So that force org changed in a way that allows players to kind of not have to utilize the basic core troop from clones nearly as much. So whereas in a normal Legion force, you have to take 3 core, in the 501st, you only have to take 1 core, but you also have to take 1 special forces. So you're already having to take an ARC trooper unit. But it also allows you, because you only have to take 1 core, you can take now more ARC troopers. And for me, I'm really excited about this one because I want a reason to paint a bunch of ARC trooper units and then have to use them. And this battle force totally allows me to do that. And I think that's one of the really cool things about battle forces. The other thing too, that from a non necessarily game side of it, is that battle forces really let your hobbyist inside go wild, right? As Pagani mentioned, there are things that are allowed in certain battle forces that may not exactly fit the look, quote unquote, of that canonical event. But that doesn't mean that you can't do a little bit of hobbying and converting and create a unit for that battle force that totally fits the theme. And that kind of stuff, if that's something that really attracts you to the game, and everybody has, different desires and stuff. But for folks like Dallas Kemp, our creative director, who's been a miniatures enthusiast and hobbyist for life, right? He made his living as a professional studio painter before he kind of moved into the more like studio side of it. Those kind of opportunities are super exciting. I get to go in and I get to craft this stuff and figure out how to do it. And battle forces can be a fun kind of prompt for people to do that. It's not that you can't do that now, but the battle force kind of gives you that narrative prompt to say, okay, well, what can you do? What do you want to do here? But there's some very cool like tweaks that we get to make, and it all goes back, like we talked about with the organized play stuff. Battle forces really add value to existing players' collections because they let you utilize things that you may already have in exciting new ways. You get to kind of put on your love at first sight glasses again and be like, I can experience this very differently, and maybe fall in love all over again with a certain unit or a certain theme.
Well, as somebody who's bought 6 boxes of Wookiee Warriors, I greatly appreciate that.
Wow, you're really gambling on that long shot, huh?
Well, I mean, like, a lot of us have dabbled with unconventional warfare, and I mean, there was a huge turnout for the unconventional warfare tournament at LVO. So, I mean, just the number of people who want to play that in an unofficial capacity, the fact that you can bring some of these battle forces into a competitive play atmosphere is just exciting in so many ways.
I can finally use all those 1.4 FDs.
Another, talking about battle forces, because I know it's kind of the hot interest. Another really important aspect of the battle forces and the reason why we wanted to lean into them when we kind of took over the games. Going back to the first question was one of the things that you looked at. As we really started diving into the games and talking to the folks who had experience with making them and kind of getting the pitfalls that they had run into and some other stuff, there was definitely this idea that, the Star Wars galaxy is massive, but the Star Wars mythology, the canon, the IP around it, it's not, it has rules. It has things like that you can do that, there's only so much like give before you start to break that mythology.
Dan reminds us all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the really important, making an army that has Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader as your two commanders, right? That breaks the mythology. It breaks the galaxy. And there are experiences and games out there, we've seen like video games, mobile games, things like that don't hold as tightly to that mythology, that core IP ideal of story. Legion was definitely built, and I think largely successful, and draws people in because it remains largely true. Like there's a lot of player choice, you get to make your own army, and then you get to fight against, you can take your rebels against droids and see how they do. And that stuff is like player choice, but all of it still works within the context of like, it feels like Star Wars. It holds to the truth of Star Wars. And we as stewards of the IP and now the game, it's really important to us that we maintain that. So that can cause limitations to like what you can really get away with. A great example of this is we talked about at Mini Stravaganza, we spoiled the Ewoks were coming.
Woohoo!
Oh yes, that's one of the things I'm most excited about.
And but the reason that we feel confident going forward with Ewoks, bringing them into the game, is the fact that we now have battle forces. So they didn't ship murder bears off world to just go fight wherever, right? Like the Ewoks are really, there's so many different organized like groups, Gungans are another one, Dathomiri Night Sisters. Like there's so many instances in Star Wars of these organized fighting forces that are not galactic spacefaring like armies, right? They don't go out and try to conquer or fight with the major armies. And so just allowing those things to kind of populate in the game but have no canonical like anchor to them is one of those things where it starts to really, you start to have to really think like, are we breaking too far away from the core of Star Wars, the core of the story that we all love, and that makes Legion kind of unique and special. Battle forces give us a way to be very true to the Star Wars canon, to allow players to really dive in and retell stories if they want to, in addition to telling their own stories, because we can now introduce these things, in ways that make sense. You can have your big Ewok army because it's a battle force, and then for the players that want to exercise their player choice, you can take some Ewoks in your normal force, right? You can mix and match. You can do the what if game. But that, I think, from a development and especially a designer standpoint, battle forces are so exciting because I think they're really the key to unlock a lot of the potential and the wonder that exists within the Star Wars galaxy, and without the dangers of diluting it, if that makes sense.
So you're telling me that I'm going to be able to field an entire army of Wookiees and Ewoks?
Led by Chief Chirpa.
Who knows what the future holds? I don't know of a battle force that would allow the Wookiees and the Ewoks to work together, but you never know. There's so much great Star Wars media coming. We don't know all the stories
agenda,
yet.
John.
Look, I'm just trying to get an all furry army, okay?
Yeah, I can tell. It's very obvious.
So a couple of the factions, or a couple of the things that were spoiled in that mini extravaganza you referenced earlier, are stuff that we're starting to see in Mandalorian without getting into, or Mandalorian and Book of Boba without getting into any spoilers here. Some of the Pike Syndicate stuff. And I know a lot of people are really excited about that. You know, we saw the new Maul, we saw, you know, a new Boba Fett, and you mentioned that the rules about existing, or putting those in existing factions. Do you think that we'll have the ability to play them as a standalone faction as well?
So, at the moment, the plans are to go through battle forces, as Shick has said here, right? And we talked a little bit about the Shadow Collective battle force at Mini Extravaganza, and that one is sort of the criminal underworld-esque battle force, right? So, whereas it's not in itself its own faction per se, you can play things like the Pike Syndicate or the Black Sun or the Mandalorians sort of independently of, say, the Imperium or things like that. So, whereas they will not necessarily be their own faction, you can play them as an entire army by themselves. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
So the Pike Syndicate, the Black Suns, the Super Commandos, the Maldalorians, as they're unofficially known. Like all of the members of that Shadow Collective are now a new semi-faction. They're mercenaries. Mercenaries themselves can't just be thrown together in a normal army. That's not how mercenaries work.
Okay.
This is another side to the Battle Force thing that I think was really exciting for us to kind of like develop. So when the transition happened, FFG had all these plans. They really wanted to kind of make a scum and villainy faction. And that's where a lot of the Shadow Collective stuff originated from, and we kind of took it and then remolded it because, again, the problem with that scum and villainy faction was it couldn't be its own just complete faction because of everything we talked about before in terms of like maintaining the core of the Star Wars like canon and all of that, making sure that the mythology stayed intact and wasn't diluted. And so mercenaries and battle forces kind of became our solution to make sure that we were staying true. So with the mercenaries, you can take them and you can add them to other forces. You know, we know the Pikes have worked with pretty much everyone. The Black Sun have a very close connection with the Imperials. They did work with the Separatists as well. So canonically, you can take certain mercenary units in your faction armies. But in addition to that, we can now use battle forces to collect mercenaries or other faction units, you know, to create effectively sub factions in a way of competitive legal armies that collect a group of things together outside of the normal faction boundaries. So the Shadow Collective, while not being its own true faction, is a sub faction that can be played as its own army, utilizing the Battle Force rules that goes along with it, which allow you to take, you know, all of the members that we've shown so far, and it can expand in the future as more things come out that may fit that bill. So, for example, things like the Book of Boba, right, and Boba Fett's Mos Espa Syndicate could be a thing. I'm not saying they are, but they could be a thing that we explore in the future. And I think that's also what's really exciting about Battle Forces is that they allow us to do things that would never make sense as a complete faction in and of themselves, but that do fit within Star Wars and the galaxy and the story in a way that we can bring together and allow players to experience and use on the tabletop. So that's kind of how those things work, right? Like, you'll never be able to take any mercenary you want and throw it into a standard Legion army. The rules don't work that way. But there will be many battle forces that will allow you to build armies that you see in various Star Wars media. And the first one of those will be the Shadow Collective.
Well, I know those of us who have been watching Boba Fett and Mandalorian, which is probably all of us who are listening to this podcast. Right. You know, every time we see a new character come out or an old favorite reoccur, I mean, the idea of like, oh, maybe someday we'll see this in Legion. I mean, that alone brings a whole nother level of excitement.
Right.
Now, talking a little bit more about the game mechanics side of things, you know, with the expansions of vital assets and priority supplies, you added more variety with objective, condition, and deployment cards to Star Wars Legion, but it also increased the value of being blue player, making increasingly higher bids for competitive play. and we've seen that kind of transition over the last couple of years. Now, the last round of FAQs that came out, they kind of brought that in line by making red player more valuable through the 4-card flip and the tableside preference. Are there any plans to introduce new cards into the game? And how much do you take that turn 0 balance into account when you plan out these future releases?
So, if you remember my answer earlier, the battle cards are one of my favorite things in the game. So I'm sure we will make more in the future. Because I think they're super cool. and I think giving players more options for what scenarios they can play is really important, right? It does a lot of things in the game. It can give units new value that they didn't have before. It can create situations where a unit that was left by the wayside because it wasn't quite as strong in competitive play, we can give them a scenario that unit is very good at, and then that can help bring them up without having to adjust rules or points, right? And as you guys get to know me a little bit better, you'll know that I don't like doing errata on things. I mostly prefer to balance through new releases and things like that. So that's one of the things that I really, really, really love about the scenarios that are available in Legion, is that you can kind of tailor things to specific stuff inside of them, and then that gives players an option to influence the game in another way that isn't just what units that I take or what command cards that I take. So I'm sure there are more coming eventually, yes. But we do not have any plans to announce those right now. And then in terms of like FAQ and turn 0 balance and stuff, it's something that we're always looking at, right? What we don't want, and we never want in a game, is for it to be decided before the game is played. And there was definitely a lot of feedback from the playtesters that these things were kind of happening, where you were getting bombing run. I know it's a really big one. Where players felt like they didn't have a chance in the game, and that is never good. So whenever a player feels that sort of helpless nature to anything, whether that's a unit, whether that's a scenario, whether that's a command card or anything like that, right? That's always a huge red flag to me as a developer, which is something is wrong here and we need to do something about it right now. So that was sort of where some of those changes came in, was helping alleviate some of those issues with specifically skewed scenarios or things like that, or specifically skewed player orders, where now it's less impactful. Not necessarily that it's not impactful, right? But it's less impactful that you win priority in terms of like being able to force a specific scenario or objective. And that's a good thing in my mind. We'll never really, as Shick has said, perfection is impossible, right? We're never going to have the exact 50-50 split on this. There's no way that you can ever do that. But doing what we can to keep it as close as possible to 50-50 is where is where we always try to go, right? So yeah.
What do you think the sweet spot is for a bid? Like, where do you look at it and say, okay, well, there's people taking 25-point bids. That's a little too high. Like, what do you think the sweet spot is?
I think if you can add something, a miniature to your army, a unit to your army, and you're leaving it on the wayside because you need to bid, that's a problem. And what point value that is, I don't know. 5. Like, if bids are over like 5 or 10 points, I think we have an issue.
You can get some sweet upgrades for 5 points.
Yeah. And that's cool and all, but I didn't paint my upgrade card.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to spend the time to hobby and paint and do those kind of things, I want to play with those miniatures. And I think any time a player chooses not to play with their miniatures, something's wrong in my eyes.
Well, from my opinion, I think based on what we saw at LVO, we were at a real sweet spot. You know, we're at a place where
it feels good.
You know, it feels good. I didn't walk into any scenario with a turn 0 where I walked away just thinking I have no chance here. And there was never a situation where it was like I'm incentivized to take a massive bid. So yeah,
what I love to hear.
Yeah. Last question I have for you guys. 4 years into this game and over 2 years since the release of the Clone Wars factions, the game's finally pretty close to a balance as far as the number of units per faction. Do you expect to see more cross-faction units like Wookiees and the LAAT? And do you have any hint as to when we'll see the third core option for Republic and CIS?
I mean, I think as far as like the cross-faction stuff, when it makes sense, you know, it's great because it kind of lets you double dip. There's obviously only so much production bandwidth that we have available. There's only so many release slots. You know, there's a lot of things that kind of say, okay, everyone's like, when are you going to get to my favorite thing? And I'm like, oh, I'd love to do it just all at once, but you can't. You know, it's a measured approach. So it's always nice when it makes sense and it really works to be able to kind of cross faction things, because then two factions get to kind of enjoy something that's brand new and fresh and brings different opportunities and options to them. It's not necessarily something that we go looking for. It's more something where it's like, you know, when we're really identifying where we want to go next with the game, what are the new releases? It's a combination of multiple factors. You know, we're talking LFL is a great partner, and we get to talk to them about things that will make sense, like what's going to be in the focus. What do they think we should be like looking at? There's the development side, which is like, what is the faction missing? What do we want to define better? Is there a tool or something specific that is visually compelling, part of the canon that hasn't come out yet that would really be a boon to this faction or that faction? And then of course there's like the badassness of it, you know. When you look at it, are you just like, why is this thing not in the game yet? Like, look at it, it looks amazing. So there's like all of these different push and pulls and tensions, and the goal really is to kind of like pick the best things based on these different criteria, and then go through. And you know, there's also like, there's, again, like I talk about bandwidth, right? You can't, you know, you also have to balance against like, okay, a unit is different than a character, is different than a vehicle. All of those things have different production requirements and timelines and things like that. So you also have to balance that out. And it becomes this really interesting puzzle of how do you do all that? And all that's to say is that, you know, I think if somebody out there loves something in Star Wars, they love a character, they love a vehicle, they love a unit, and we haven't gotten to it yet, our goal is to get there. When that will happen, you know, is kind of variable, and who knows. But the dual faction stuff, it really comes down to, oh, this makes sense in the game, and we think that not only canonically can it split between two different factions because we see it appear in multiple different ways, we also think that adds value to both factions, and it is good for the game, right? Every determination is always, does it make the game better, in some small way or some large way? And that it's true for core units too. You know, I think there's definitely like places where there are factions that want certain things, you know, CIS and Galactic Republic really wanting that third core option. Those are places that we definitely want to go and explore. I also think that's a spot where, again, you know, Battle Forces offer this really intriguing solution, quote unquote, to that, because once you're not locked into a single force org, your faction options become so much more valuable and interesting, right? One of the reasons that third core option not being there is kind of so felt is because if you have to take 3 core options and you only have 2, you get into this samey relationship where you're like, well, I'm going to take this, and then I'm going to take a few more because, you know, you want a good selection of core units typically. And so like variety is really good, right? It keeps things from feeling rote. And Battle Forces do allow us to kind of like solve that issue as well in a different way, because now maybe, like I said, with the 501st, you only have to take 1 core option, and you can take the rest in support options or specialist options or things like that. Or special forces, excuse me, not specialists. I'm thinking of something else. Those things are all opportunities that, again, drive back to our hope of, we want to make the game as interesting, as fun, and as, you know, exciting as possible, with a lot of different questions that players get to ask and a lot of different answers that players get to puzzle out.
So blink twice if Gungan infantry are on the way.
Oh. Well,
wow, that's eerie.
I know. I don't think the video is going anywhere, so only people know. So we'll blink right now.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys have any other questions you want to ask?
I mean, so many, but man, we're running out of time, as it looks like. But I'm absolutely thrilled with what we've gotten to record here, and so many of these answers. And I think a lot of the audience out there will be very, very jazzed to hear what's coming in the future, and your guys' attitude and attention to detail that you're bringing to Legion.
Yeah, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you
this
so
is
much.
an awesome experience, and we look forward to, talking to you guys again, and hopefully seeing you out at, maybe the next LVO.
Yeah, absolutely.
We
Thank
love
you so
LVO.
much for hosting us. I always say, you guys, we talked about this before, but you do the hard work. We just show up for an episode or two and yammer. You kind of let us take over for an hour, and then we go away, and you all just keep making episodes. So we can come back later.
Well, it's a symbiotic relationship, to say the least.
Yes, yeah, we'll be dissecting this for weeks, I'm sure. So.
But yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was a blast. Definitely looking forward to coming back on again in the future and talking more about Legion and whatever else the cool and exciting things to discuss are.
Yeah, thank y'all very much.
Thanks.
That'll do it for this episode. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And a big thank you to Atomic Mass Games and Mr. Will Shick and Will Pagani for making themselves available for this. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk to them again here soon in the future. In the meantime, you can stop on by the Facebook page, facebook.com/Legion Outriders. And as always, a giant thank you to our Patreon supporters that make this all possible. Thank you, guys. If you would like to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Legion Outriders. And we'll see you next episode.
This concludes the current episode of the Legion Outriders podcast. You may cultivate a tactical advantage by observing the Outriders on Facebook or Twitter at Legion Outriders. Wisdom advocates subscribing to the podcast. Acting otherwise is reckless.